Thank you, Starboard. We'll be hearing more of Starboard while you're doing your all-important People's Choice votes later on. This is not the official welcome, this is the pre-welcome. We're going to have a much more important welcome in a second. I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping before we move on. There are hundreds of people gathered here tonight in Llewellyn Hall. There are also people live streaming from all around Australia, Chile, India, Mauritius, Bangladesh, Canada, the USA, the UK, Singapore, Thailand, Japan, South Africa, Belgium, and France. And so we'd like to have a warm welcome to the people watching us on the live stream today. Two very important pieces of... Yes, well done for tuning in. Tonight is all about the 12 people who are going to grace the carpet. They've put an enormous amount of effort and preparation and rehearsal into this, and our job is to make it as easy and as successful as we can for them. There are two very important things that we need to do. First of all, the very obvious one is we need to turn our phones off. Silent will do, off is best. Vibrate is not an option. A little bit of volume is not an option, okay? We don't want any phones going off during the presentations. Secondly, the second most important thing is that if anyone needs to come and go, now it's a very short presentation, you probably shouldn't need to come and go, but if you do, we're going to go via exits 1 and exit 2. You'll find those in the back. Anyone coming and going via exit 6 is in big trouble because we can see you there and it's a little bit off-putting. Now, if you do need to come and go, please only come and go when you hear applause. If it's silent, it means someone is standing there trying their best to win the competition. We don't want to spoil that for them. So only come and go when the applause is happening. Other than that, we're in for an exciting evening. And now to officially and formally welcome, would you please welcome Professor Anne Evans, Dean of Higher Research, to do the full official welcome. Thank you, Anne.
Hello everybody and welcome to the 2023 ANU 3-minute thesis competition. As Simon said, I'm Anne Evans. I'm the Dean for Higher Degree Research here at the ANU, and tonight is a night that I'm really proud of in my role to come and celebrate the work that we do here at ANU. To start, I'd like to acknowledge and celebrate the first Australians on whose traditional lands we meet. Pay my respects to the elders of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, past and present. I would like to acknowledge their continuing contribution to our city and to our university and welcome any First Nations people joining us here today. Tonight, we are here to celebrate the work of our higher degree research candidates across the ANU. As researchers, it's very important for us to continue to tell people about our work and how it can change lives, change communities, and transform society. The 3-minute thesis is one way that we are using to develop the skills for our research candidates to do just that. Presenting a thesis in 3 minutes is hard. Our contestants have been fine-tuning their communication skills so that they're able to distill 3 years of research into 3 minutes. I really hope that you enjoy the show tonight as much as I know that I will. I would now like to hand over to our MC for this evening. This is a bit of a, pop-in, pop-out show, isn't it? Back over now to Simon Clues. Thank you all.
Thank you, Anne, and a special thank you to Anne because Anne has been very supportive of the competition over the years, and Anne is the person who signs off on the budget for the prizes, which is very, very important. Now, we're building to the competition, but we've got to build the intention, the anticipation. I'm going to start with the history of the competition. Queensland, back in 2007, is in a drought. The state government, to show that they're a can-do, action-based government, gives out 3-minute plastic timers. Okay. Professor Alan Lawson, who was then in the same position as Anne, who is now an emeritus professor, is standing in the shower, enjoying his allotted 3 minutes of hot water, watches the grains of sand trickle through the hour, and then suddenly has an absolute brainwave. What if you had to condense the kernel, the story of your thesis into 3 minutes? And it was a moment of genius because the 3-minute thesis competition was born there and then. Literally the next year, the competition took off. I was at the first final in Queensland. It was an incredibly exciting event. It was in one of those venues which is both a sporting venue and a cultural venue. And it was funny because it was obviously a cultural, intellectual event, but it actually had the feel of a sporting venue. We were sitting in the bleachers, people were cheering. It was very exciting. It took off, it went crazy. Trans-Tasman competition was inaugurated in 2010 simply because there was a huge amount of interest from around the region, and suddenly people were coming to Australia once a year for this amazing competition. U21, which is a conglomerate of some of the bigger universities around the world, invented their virtual international competition. There'll never be a real international competition simply because the southern and the northern hemispheres have different academic timetables, so we're never ever going to be in sync. But the U21 video competition is not a bad attempt at that. Trans-Tasman has to become Asia-Pacific in 2016 because everyone in the region is jumping on board, and it is the biggest thing since Ben-Hur. And now over 900 universities in more than 85 countries take part. I can't even think of a university topic that is taught in over 900 universities. So 3-minute thesis is a passport. The people tonight, the 12 tonight, and everyone who's gone before them, simply by taking part in 3MT and talking about 3MT, it opens so many doors around the world. So just by putting their hand up and taking part in the competition, they've already made a huge commitment to communicating their research. It's a competition, so there are rules. I'll whiz you through the rules, or I'll give you the highlights of the rules. And this is the most important rule. It is 3 minutes. It is not 3 minutes and 1 second. It can be 2 minutes and 59 if you like, but at 3 minutes, if you go over 3 minutes, that's it, you're out. When I train people for the competition, I tell them, if for some reason they get to 2 minutes and 58 seconds and they're still talking, if they just shut up halfway through a sentence, they can still win. If they bravely finish that sentence, there's the door, okay? It's 3 minutes and not a minute more. You get a PowerPoint slide. Essentially, you're presenting a one-person show, and this is your backdrop or your set. Now, it is literally a static slide. It has no bells, no whistles, nothing animated, no sound built in. It sits there. It adds a mood, it adds some background. It can help you with your topic, but it can't distract because it's all about the oration. It's about the verbal presentation that takes place on the carpet. There's no props, there's no costumes, there's no singing, there's no dancing. It is basically you and the power of your voice. If you do feel the need to move, there is a Dance Your PhD competition, and if you really want to get fancy, there actually is a Bake Your PhD competition too, which I've always wanted to judge and have never got lucky. And the judges, who I'm going to introduce you in a second, what they say goes. There is no debating, no discussing. It's a hard enough decision to make. When you see these 12 people, you'll understand. We don't want them to have to do it again. So once they've decided, they've decided. Now, I am doing this because the person who would normally be standing here, the thesis whisperer, Inga Mewburn, is off in the hallowed halls of Cambridge University. And she handed over to me all the rules and a big list and the slides. And when we got to the 3 minutes, she said, now we have a triangle. Okay, when they go over 3 minutes, we have a triangle. And I thought, a triangle's not very good. I mean, these people have been waiting for a year to do this. They've put their heart and their soul into it. And a triangle? I mean, if you think back to the school band in primary school, the triangle was given to the kid in the corner who couldn't read me. That was me, okay? A triangle is not good enough. So from home, I've brought a gong. Okay. That's what you hear. If you hear that, you've gone over 3 minutes. I'm going to hand the gong to Lindsay, our timekeeper. Hopefully, she will never have to use it. Apparently, in the history of ANU, no one has ever heard the triangle or the gong because these people are so good. So we'll move on from the triangle. This is the judging criteria. There are 2 categories that they judge under: comprehension and content, and engagement and communication. Now, when I talk to judges and sort of set them up for this, I tend to summarize under 2 categories. Essentially, the questions are, what story did they tell, and how well did they tell it? Because tonight is all about communicating the story of your research. At the back, in the tastefully lit table, we have 5 judges who I'll introduce to you. They have the hardest job in the room tonight, much harder than anyone else. Glenn Nagel comes from the Deep Space Communication Tracking, the NASA station with all the satellites up on the hills. Glenn is an amazing science communicator. If ever you get lucky and get put in a bus and taken up to NASA, and you get Glenn as your spokesperson, you will have the most amazing, he's just brilliant to watch. He's also one of the luckiest people in the world. His office has spacesuits and rockets and a bit of the moon in it. It is just the best place to work. So Glenn Nagel is our first judge. Sitting next to Glenn is Adrian Francis, who is one of the voices and the faces of the ABC. And at this point, I always go on, we are so lucky to have the ABC. One of the things I love to do is just go around the world and teach, and I talk about communication, and I tell people that getting on the radio is a brilliant thing. Other countries don't have the ABC. They don't have community radio, they don't have talkback, they don't have intelligence, they just have wall-to-wall crap. So we are so lucky that we have people like Adrienne and the ABC, so we thank you for that. Next is Jack Heath. Now, tonight is all about telling stories. These people are only going to tell one story tonight. Jack Heath has told over 40. In fact, he's been upstairs for 20 minutes. He's probably written another one. Jack Heath just churns out bestsellers. He is one of our most prolific and successful writers. And so if anyone can spot a good story, it'll be Jack. Sitting next to Jack is Meredith Wright. Meredith Wright is what's called a career bookseller, in that she's sold books in various stores all the way for her whole career. The great thing about booksellers, one of my other hats is running literary events and writers' festivals. And writers' festivals always attempt to mimic or to respond to the zeitgeist, what people are thinking and talking about. And when I need to know what people are thinking and talking about, I do two things. I read the newspapers or turn on the radio, or I walk into a bookstore and say, what are people buying? Booksellers have their fingers on the pulse of the brains of the nation. They are amazing people. So thank you, Meredith, for coming along tonight. And lastly, Yu Ting Hung is here for two reasons. Firstly, she's a scientist and a science communicator. Very good. Secondly, and equally importantly, we've introduced a tradition at ANU that whoever stands on the carpet and wins gets to come back the next year and judge, because above all, they know what the person on the carpet is going through. So, two jobs tonight, judging and also empathizing and sympathizing. Those are our 5 judges. A warm welcome. Because it's a competition, there are prizes. These are the prizes on the screen. They're not to be sneezed at. But, as I often say, it isn't only about the prizes. Because the sorts of skills that people doing 3-minute thesis learn, the networks they create, the people they meet, are in a way much more valuable than a few $1,000s. I know someone back when I used to teach 3-minute thesis at Melbourne who could trace a direct line between the very first time he walked out and started talking about his research all the way through to the multi-million-dollar startup that he runs in New York. And he sees absolute direct connection. So 3-minute thesis, as I say, it's a passport. It can take you places. That's the background, that's the history, that's why we're here, that's how we're going to judge. And now we're going to have what you've all come to tonight's contestants, okay? I will introduce them one at a time, they will come out. Everyone has a pre-slide with all the information on, and then they have a show slide, and that's the backdrop to their performance. They will do their 3-minute thing, no one will go over 3 minutes. I'll go off again, next one on, we'll go through all 12, and then we'll have some more music and we'll judge them. We drew the names out of a hat. So the person who got lucky or unlucky, depending on how you think about it, is Logan Davis. And now Logan comes to us from the Applied Metrology Labs in the Center for Gravitational Astrophysics. With a background in engineering and physics, his work revolves around the application of fundamental physics for practical problem solving. Tonight he will be telling us about his work in the world of gemstones. So please welcome Logan Davis to talk about finding diamonds in the rough.
Cut, color, carat, and clarity. These are the 4 C's that are used to determine the value of a diamond. At the moment, someone who wants to polish the best possible diamond might spend hours or even days staring at a single rough stone, trying to figure out where to polish it to create the largest, clearest, most beautiful diamond possible. But surely there's got to be a better way, right? Well, that's what my research is all about. See, I'm working on a way to create a digital map of all the cracks and flaws that are inside a rough diamond. We can then take that map and plug it into a computer algorithm that will tell us exactly where to polish that stone to create the largest, clearest, most beautiful diamond possible. Now, I create these maps by shining a laser inside the diamond. If the diamond's clear, the laser just passes all the way through. But if there's a flaw inside that diamond, our laser will hit it, and some of that light is going to reflect back towards us. By measuring how much light reflects back towards us, and then repeating that measurement from a bunch of different angles, I can build up a map of exactly what's going on inside that rough stone. Unfortunately, there's just one problem with this though, and I've shown an example of it behind me here. You see, when light moves between 2 different materials, it bends due to something called refraction. In this example, the light coming from Einstein bends as it moves from the water to the air, which means that by the time it reaches our eyes, certain body parts appear to be in the wrong spot, or we maybe even create double-ups of the same body parts like his legs. This is the exact same thing that's happening to the flaws inside our diamond. Refraction makes them appear in the wrong spot. Now, it's not the end of the world, all is well. Turns out humans have actually known the maths behind refraction for over 1,000 years. So as long as we can calculate how much our light is bending by, well, I can just correct for it and still figure out where things are inside the rough stone. All you need to know is the two materials that your light is moving between. So in our case, that's diamond and air. And we need to know what the surface of the diamond looks like at the spot that the light is hitting it. That one's actually a little bit tougher. See, turns out rough diamonds are exactly that. They're rough. They're covered in bumps and bulges and cracks, which means we need a way to know exactly what the diamond looks like at any point on the surface. So to do that, I actually designed and built a system very similar to an ultrasound that you might see a doctor use. But instead of using sound waves, I use light. When we use light, we can make much more precise measurements. It means I can actually build up the surface of a diamond to be accurate to within 1/10 the width of a human hair. With that surface, I can calculate how much our light is bending, and I can correct for it to know where the flaws are inside my rough diamond. This takes a process that would normally take hours or even days and turns it into a fully automated 30-minute scan that can literally find a diamond in the rough.
Thank you, Logan. I told you the judges had a hard job. Our second speaker, our second contestant is Diana Tung. Hailing from Melbourne, Diana is a PhD student in the School of Archaeology and Anthropology in the College of Arts and Social Sciences. She came back to Canberra last year after being stuck in the Peruvian Amazon during the COVID-19 pandemic. Tonight she'll be speaking about an amazing-looking fruit that might just make the world a whole lot better. Would you please welcome Diana Tung?
What if you could save the planet just by eating a fruit? The aguaje promises to do just that and more. The aguaje is a yellow fruit with reddish-brown scales. It's slightly smaller than a kiwi, and some say it tastes a bit like a mango. I think it's simply incomparable. The aguaje is full of healthy omega fats. It has more vitamin A than carrots, and according to locals in the Peruvian Amazon, is great for women's libido. This remarkable fruit is now at the center of several multi-million-dollar campaigns to turn it into the next big superfood. The idea is to make it so profitable that harvesters will want to climb 30 meters up to collect the fruits instead of cutting down the palms entirely. This way, the carbon stays in the ground as opposed to being released into the atmosphere, and consumers have an exciting new product to try. Sounds great, doesn't it? But there's actually so much more to the story. During the first 2 years of COVID-19, I conducted my PhD research in the heart of the Peruvian Amazon. There, in between lockdowns, I spoke with entrepreneurs, harvesters, and government officials. Anyone in the business who would talk with me. There I learned that the aguaje is notoriously difficult to transport, clean, and to process, and that there are still numerous obstacles in the way of aguaje's global domination. I also learned about the fruit's social and economic importance. In Iquitos, a city the same size as Canberra, over 500 families are supported by the local aguaje economy. I also spoke with over 80 aguaje street vendors, most of them being women. I hung out with them at their stalls, with their families, and at the wholesale markets. These women would explain how hard it was to work with the aguaje by showing me their hands, full of cuts. Some of them, after several years of working the aguaje, had even lost their fingerprints. Yet, it was by selling the aguaje on the streets that these women could become financially independent from their husbands, give their kids a formal education, and during the hardest moments of COVID-19, give their families a lifeline. As these women themselves would say, their story is increíble, pero cierto, incredible but true. Something as simple as a piece of fruit can change lives.
Thank you, Diana. Speaker number three is Zoe Piper. Now, Zoe could never decide on just one career path, instead deciding to take on many different ones at the same time. Her curiosity around career building led Zoe to take on a PhD at the Crawford School. She's here tonight to share what she has learned from others who've also crafted multifaceted careers. Would you please welcome Zoe Piper?
Governments around the world have invested billions in trying to get industry and research to collaborate with each other more effectively. However, the results of this investment have been variable. But no one sector can solve grand challenges alone. We need industry, government, and research to collaborate effectively to create large-scale impact. We know that researchers can solve difficult challenges, uncovering breakthrough ideas and inventing new technologies. That industry has the skills to commercialise that knowledge, creating viable enterprises that employ people and grow the economy. And that government sets the guardrails, delivering the infrastructure and rules to ensure the system operates effectively. Yet the prevailing stereotype is that academics have no idea how to talk to industry, that industry only care about corporate profits and shareholder returns, with government frequently setting policy that's totally disconnected from reality. There's endless commentary about the differences in language, timeframes, incentive structures, and so on between the three sectors, and just how hard it is to span this divide. However, there are a cohort of individuals who have overcome this divide, working on a portfolio of engagements in industry, research, and government concurrently. I had the opportunity to identify and interview 25 of these tri-sector professionals, each of whom were engaged in a diverse range of roles across the sectors. What united this cohort was their drive to create positive impact in the world, their comfort with ambiguity, with not knowing, with operating in a space that there's really no guidebook for, and their ability to move seamlessly between different worlds, connecting the dots and translating between different groups. The impressive results they'd achieved frequently drew to mind the saying, "A jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one," which most people neglect the second half of. Yet despite the significant value they could add to any engagement they take on, organisations and recruiters don't always understand how to attract and retain tri-sector professionals. In fact, these multifaceted careers could often be bewildering in an environment where we're used to being able to neatly place people into well-labelled boxes. My PhD uncovered strategies that can help both individuals and organisations embrace the concept of boundaryless careers that span multiple sectors. But just writing that down in 80,000 words didn't feel like enough, so I've created the Tri-Sector Hub to empower these professionals and connect them to organisations that can benefit from their unique skill set and ability to create impact. Climate change, inequality, cost of living, and other grand challenges are becoming more urgent. There's never been a more important time to ensure industry, government, and research are collaborating effectively on the system-level change that's required to create a better future.
Thank you, Zoe. Our next speaker is Terry Warner. Terry has come from over a decade working from a lived experience perspective in the mental health sector in the ACT to the School of Medicine and Psychology at ANU, where her research seeks to challenge ideas about who can know things about policy and practice in both of these fields. Would you please welcome Terry Warner?
How would you feel if the government told you you had a permanent disability, but you didn't agree? Or if you knew you had a permanent disability, but your doctors said you didn't? These are situations that some Australians with mental health conditions have found themselves in because getting support from the National Disability Insurance Scheme, or NDIS, means proving that we have a permanent psychosocial disability. But what is a psychosocial disability? In Australia, it's commonly used as a policy category of eligibility for the NDIS. And by their definition, everyone with a psychosocial disability has a mental health diagnosis, but not everyone with a mental health diagnosis has a psychosocial disability. But that's not the only definition out there, because this isn't just a policy category, or a mental health category, or indeed a clinical category. It's a category of person, and not everyone agrees who's in it. Policymakers decide these things after research and consultation, but policy decisions aren't always made by the people who show up. Sometimes they're made by the people who are let in. And I wanted people for whom this category has real-life consequences to talk about what they think and feel about the term psychosocial disability and how a definition they do or don't agree with would affect their lives. I wanted to know, in the broadest sense, what it means to them. So I started asking some basic questions. Is a psychosocial disability a real thing, or just a box-ticking exercise for the NDIS? What does it mean for the NDIS and for real people if the definition that we're using isn't the only or the most appropriate one? And how does identifying or being identified as having a psychosocial disability make people feel about themselves? I came at these questions from the position that no one is the ultimate judge of truth, and there's more than one way to produce knowledge about something, but not everyone has access to the means of producing and sharing their knowledge. And what I found is that people will resist and subvert categories that don't work for them, even when that puts them at odds with what other people think. But what other people think often shapes the way that we understand the world and where we fit in it. I never expected to find a single definition of psychosocial disability that would suit every person and every purpose. And if I'm honest, I still don't know how I would define it. But what I do know, and this is why research of this type matters so much, is that the people who were shut out of these decisions are not getting the support that they need from the NDIS or elsewhere. And that needs to change.
Thank you, Terry. Next, we have Dan Veerasomi. Coming all the way from Mauritius and now undertaking a PhD at the College of Engineering, Computing and Cybernetics, would you please welcome Dan Veerasomi, who's going to tell us all about saving the Great Barrier Reef.
The Great Barrier Reef is in danger, and this is our fault. Due to our intensive use of fossil fuels, sea temperatures are rising, causing the Great Barrier Reef to bleach. Imagine that in 20 years you are snorkeling on the reef, but instead of colorful corals and rich marine life, all you can see is destruction, desolation, death. That's the sad reality that awaits us if quick actions are not taken to protect the reef. To save the reef, scientists have developed a new technique called cloud brightening. And by using cloud brightening, we can increase the number of clouds over the reef, shade the reef, cool it down, and prevent bleaching. But the reef is huge. It is the single biggest living structure on planet Earth. It is, in fact, bigger than Italy. So a single cloud brightening machine will not be able to cover the whole reef. Hundreds of these machines will be required. The issue is that these machines consume a lot of energy and are powered using fossil fuels. Isn't it ironic that we are trying to save the reef using fossil fuels? In my research, I am looking at how we can power cloud brightening machines in a clean way. But this is challenging because the reef is a World Heritage Site. And its strong cultural, spiritual, and economic values must not be put at risk. What renewable energy then would best suit the reef? Is it solar, wind, wave, or maybe tidal energy? Using years of weather data, I've analyzed the resources availability throughout the whole reef. But I've also considered what impact each technology could have on the rich and fragile ecosystem. My findings show that using solar panels on the cloud brightening vessel would be the best and safest option. Not only is solar energy available throughout the whole reef, but it would also have minimal impact on marine life and on the 200 bird species living on the reef. However, we can't only use solar panels to power the machine. It would not be reliable. No, we need some form of stored energy. Or what if? What if instead the solution lied in an alternative fuel? A clean, high energy density fuel such as hydrogen. With my research and my work on hydrogen, we will be able to get rid of fossil fuels on the reef, save the Great Barrier Reef, and leave something meaningful behind to future generations.
Thank you, Dan. In sixth spot, we have Nusrat Haida. Nusrat's from the Research School of Accounting here at ANU. Her passion lies in exploring the fascinating intersections between accounting and its broader implications, debunking the misconception that accounting is solely about numbers and financial statements. Will you please welcome Nusrat Haida.
What if I told you that your boss makes 475 times more than you do? And if you think that's ridiculous, the CEO of Mattel, the toy-making company behind Barbie and Hot Wheels, makes 4,987 times more than their regular worker in annual compensation. So the regulators in US were concerned by these differences and wanted to highlight how a company treats its regular workers. To do so, they made it mandatory to disclose the pay ratio between the CEO and average employee in company's annual report. So previous studies have seen that these kind of financial regulations usually impact firms' financial outcome, like their sales, profits, share prices. But in my research, I investigate whether this kind of financial reporting regulation impact firms' employee treatment, which goes beyond numbers. So, different stakeholders may react to the news of extreme pay gap differently. For example, employees who learn how much less they are getting paid compared to their bosses may feel dissatisfied, which will undoubtedly have an impact on their productivity, hence firm's profitability. Or a customer may take this as an example of employee mistreatment and choose to boycott that product, causing a drop in their sales. Similarly, an investor may want to withdraw their investment. So, consistent with this argument, I find that firms with high pay ratios are actually being financially punished. Their productivity, sales growth, profit margin, even their firm value decreases significantly. So these firms know, unless and until they make these figures turn around or take alternative measures to justify their higher pay, their existence will be at stake. So what do these firms do? And that's the most interesting finding of my study. I find that firms tend to compensate the high pay ratio by caring more about employee welfare and invest in employee safety measures. Consequently, their employee-related misconduct reduced significantly. For example, Mattel, they now provide a holistic support for their employees and regarded as the most loved workplace for 2 consecutive years now. McDonald's, whose CEO was getting almost 1,200 times more than their regular worker, is now offering scholarship to support their employees' education. Therefore, my study demonstrates that financial reporting regulation can bring social benefit to ordinary people, just like you and me.
Thank you, Nusrat. Now, we've seen 6 of the 12 so far, and I think the picture of ANU as an amazing place to do research is becoming very, very clear. Next, we're going to meet Nick Barishev. Nick is a PhD candidate in the Clear Vision Research Lab, whose passion for exercise and vision science is simply unparalleled. Tonight, he will unveil how the special messages of exercise could be the key to saving your precious sight. So would you please welcome Nick Barishev.
When I was 15 years old, I remember waking up in hospital, not being able to see anything out of the bottom left of my vision. I had a stroke, and because of that, my vision now looks like this. Now, I want you to picture that blind spot blocking the center of that image, because that's what people see every day when they suffer with a devastating disease called age-related macular degeneration, or AMD. AMD is caused by damage to the important piece of tissue that lines the back of your eye called your retina, which is responsible for your vision. But this damage only worsens with age, and even worse, the particular part of your retina that damages is responsible for pretty much all your useful vision, including your central vision. So when you suffer with AMD, the center of everything you see disappears. But here's what's scary. Right now, 1 in 7 Australians will develop AMD in their lifetime, meaning 1 in 7 of you here tonight will eventually lose your central vision. What if we could stop this from happening to you using something as easy as exercise? We all know how good exercise is for us. Going to the gym makes you feel stronger, running makes you feel fitter. But despite these physical benefits, the precise mechanisms by how exercise protects our bodies from disease, especially AMD, is still not understood. We've shown that just 4 weeks of physical exercise can protect your eyes against the same damage that causes AMD. My research has found that when you exercise, your body produces small molecules called extracellular vesicles, which act like molecular text messages inside your bodies. Not only does every cell in your body already use these messages as a normal way of talking to one another, but it's only when you exercise that the messages that are sent to your eyes are changing what they are saying, and that's what's protecting your retina from damage. When we took a handful of those messages from an animal that had exercised and put them into the eye of an animal that didn't exercise, that animal showed almost the same protection to damage as the exercised animal. So can we use this molecule as the message of exercise and practically prescribe it to someone for whom exercise isn't an option? Imagine being able to use your body's natural response to exercise, using what's already inside your bodies to stop AMD and stop you from losing your eyesight later in life. I want you to take a moment to look at the image on the screen and just imagine waking up every day and seeing this. Because of my stroke, this is what I see when I look at this memory of me and my beautiful mum. If we do nothing now, for 1 in 7 of you, that blind spot will be in the center of your vision.
Thank you, Nick. Next, we're going to meet Yabo Yan. Working as a part-time nurse in the hospital while also undertaking her PhD research here at ANU, Yabo is fascinated about how politics can impact on health. To talk for exactly 3 minutes on why never the twain shall meet, would you please welcome Yabo Yan.
How often do you go visit your GP? For a 20-year-old, the average number of GP visits is 6 times per year. For a 75-year-old, this number can go up to 14 to 18 times per year. When we get older, we might need to visit our GP more frequently for managing chronic conditions, which affects every 1 in 2 Australians. If I have diabetes, how often should I go visit my GP? How much does it cost? Does Medicare really support me to get the care I need? Probably not, because Medicare was designed in the 1970s when infectious disease was the main reason for visiting a doctor. To understand how to solve the mismatch between Medicare and chronic disease, my research asks the question, what influences effective and efficient chronic disease management in Australia's general practice? I interviewed politicians, bureaucrats, GPs, and executives from the Australian Medical Association, the Royal Australian College of GPs, and the Australian College of Rural and Remote Medicine. I found while both sides talk about how politics, leadership, and money can influence health reform, a mutual distrust between doctors and policymakers is probably the biggest barrier to reform. My research also shows doctors and policymakers distrust each other to an extent where they view each other as more evil and powerful than they actually are in reality. It may sound a bit like paranoia to you, but in social psychology, this phenomenon is called devil shift. What does this mean? This means when the government believes doctors are so powerful that they can easily destroy a policy which they dislike, doctors, on the other hand, think they've lost their voices, and the government can do whatever they want to do with general practice, just like what they did with the Medicare rebate phrase. When the government says, look, I can offer you this extra amount of money, let's try to do something different with chronic disease management. Doctors would go, well, first, your money is not enough to cover the cost of making changes to my practice, and second, I think what you really want to do is to nationalize our health system. It is like never the twain shall meet. But we have to find ways to reduce distrust and rebuild trust. Because without doing so, everyone, including policymakers and doctors, will suffer. And it is those who have multiple chronic conditions, who struggle to pay out-of-pocket fees, will suffer the most.
Next, we have Amy Hamilton. Amy is a researcher at the ANU College of Law within the Center for Law, Arts and the Humanities. She's interested in the broader questions of belonging, identity, and attachment that citizenship inspires, and the nature of government power over citizens and non-citizens. Would you please welcome Amy Hamilton?
In my research about Australian citizenship, I kept coming across the word bond. Every potential citizen who takes a citizenship test receives an information booklet that declares on its front page, Australian citizenship, our common bond. Citizenship, it tells us, binds us together. Understanding and feeling citizenship as a bond is not limited to this one document. It is in our law too, in the Australian Citizenship Act, and in the words of judges when they make decisions about citizenship. So what is a bond? You probably have an idea already. A bond is something that connects and holds together. A bond unites. It's also doing some emotional work too, drawing on the other relationships we talk about in terms of bonds, like those of family and friendship, each relationship associated with love and connection. But is this really the citizenship story of Australia? My research tells of a different kind of citizenship bond, one that is exclusive and restrictive, more like a rope or a cord wrapped around the Australian body politic. It is a bond in keeping with the white Australia of our past. Anglo-Australian law, based on a fiction of terra nullius, has treated Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as citizens without rights. Citizenship, it turns out, is no guarantee of equal treatment. The effect of these laws tell us that citizenship was not and is still not a common bond. Instead of a bond of love and connection, this bond is about power and control. My research digs deeper into the citizenship bond and asks, who is included in this bond and what are its limitations? This is important because how we imagine Australian citizenship shapes how Australian law is made and how it is interpreted. Do we imagine citizenship as a horizontal bond between people or as a vertical bond between the state and an individual? Citizenship also influences people's choices at the ballot box. And this year, Australian citizens had the right to vote in the Voice referendum, a generous invitation set out in the Uluru Statement from the Heart to take a small step towards recalibrating Australian citizenship, perhaps a step to break the bonds of Australian citizenship's past.
Thank you, Amy. Next, we're going to meet Sai Shyam Ramesh. Sai is from the Mayo Lab and is researching cholesterol uptake in malaria parasites. He is here to tell us how he's using an interesting aspect of ancient Greek warfare to combat one of the deadliest infectious diseases today. So would you please welcome Sai Shyam Ramesh.
We all love junk foods, don't we? Spicy McChicken, double cheeseburgers, filled with cholesterol. Do you know what loves cholesterol more than us? Plasmodium, the parasite that causes malaria. Plasmodium needs cholesterol to make their own membranes, but they cannot make cholesterol and take it from the humans. This parasite affected more than 200 million people in 2021, and malaria cases are increasing due to drug resistance. We have used Plasmodium's love for cholesterol as a strategy to dodge this bullet. But first, let me tell you a short story. Greeks were fighting a war against the Trojans and were about to lose the war. Then, Greeks devised a strategy. They hid inside a hollow wooden horse, tricked the Trojans, attacked them at night, and won the war. But with a lot of casualties. Had they used a Trojan elephant or a Trojan hippopotamus, they could have hidden more soldiers inside and reduced the casualties. Inspired by the Greeks, I applied their strategy in my project and tricked the parasites by conjugating, or let's just say hiding, anti-malarial drugs within cholesterol. The parasites, greedy for cholesterol, took the drugs in and were killed more efficiently than when presented with just the drugs. I then wanted a better strategy. So I kept the hidden soldiers constant and replaced the horse with 5 other animals. More scientifically, I kept the anti-malarial drug constant and replaced this cholesterol with 5 other sterols, which are greasy substances closely related to cholesterol. Interestingly, one particular sterol with the hidden anti-malarial drug killed the parasites even more efficiently than cholesterol with the same hidden drug. Redefining the Trojan horse strategy, I will develop a drug delivery system and tackle drug resistance. Only last month, for the first time in 20 years, a local malaria outbreak affected 5 people in the United States, where malaria is supposed to be eradicated. You may think it's only 5 people in a distant country, but remember, COVID-19 started with 1 person and spread to the entire world. If we don't do anything, very soon malaria could affect billions each year. With my redefined Trojan horse strategy, I hope and aim to eliminate this devastating disease.
Thank you, Sai. Next, we're going to hear from Madeleine Mackenzie. Madeleine studies the oldest surviving structures in the Milky Way that we can reliably age. She hopes that her research will help us to understand how the first stars and galaxies formed and uncover the origins of different chemical elements in our universe. So would you please welcome Madeleine Mackenzie.
Where do you come from? Canberra? The ACT? Australia? No, think bigger. Where do you really come from? Earth, the solar system, the stars, the calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood. In fact, chemical elements across the periodic table are forged in the cosmic furnaces that light up our night sky. I work in a field called galactic archaeology. Just like an archaeologist might go to the pyramids to study the lives of early Egyptians, I look at the ancient relics of our universe to learn more about the Milky Way's childhood. These relics are called globular clusters. Every single pinprick of light that you see is from a star over 12 billion years old. That's over twice the age of the Earth and nearly as old as the universe itself. And because of this, I like to think of globular clusters as the retirement villages of our galaxy. But these senior citizens are harboring a secret. Half the stars in globular clusters have far too much of some of the elements important for life, like nitrogen, sodium, and aluminium. And we don't know why. But as a galactic archaeologist, I'm determined to figure it out. I've made precise measurements of exactly how much of each element is inside a sample of globular cluster stars, and have compared these measurements to a variety of different stellar models. This allows me to travel 12 billion years back in time to when globular clusters were still forming, to identify which kind of star is responsible for creating these weird chemical patterns. To do this, I use a technique called stellar spectroscopy, where we take the light from each star and break it up into a rainbow. We can then read this rainbow like a barcode, and this tells us exactly how much of each element is inside a star. Then, I compare these measurements to the elements produced in a wide variety of stars. Stars that are big, small, young, and old. What my research suggests is that the type of star that can best reproduce the chemical patterns in globular clusters is called an asymptotic giant branch star. These are the geriatrics of the sky, and as they age, they slowly shed off their outer layers. This material cools and sinks to the center of the cluster, and new stars, rich in nitrogen, sodium, and aluminium, are born from their ashes. This means that early on in the universe, asymptotic giant branch stars were important for creating some of the elements that we find in our bodies. So where do you really come from? Well, in the words of astrophysicist Carl Sagan, the cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff.
Well, we've come an enormous way since we started at 6 o'clock, and we've seen some of the huge range of research being done at ANU. And sadly, we have come to our last speaker, Ryan O'Donnell. Ryan is a second-year PhD candidate with the Lindy Lab at the ANU Research School of Biology in the Division of Ecology and Evolution. Now, believe it or not, prior to their scientific work, Ryan worked professionally as an opera singer before plants proved to be far more interesting than Puccini. Their current work is focused on understanding the evolution of Australian orchids and their fungal partners. And today, they're going to talk a little bit about what it's like to play genealogist for one of the biggest families on the planet. So would you please welcome our 12th and last speaker, Ryan O'Donnell.
Orchids are a lot more than just pretty flowers to adopt, neglect, and murder on the office windowsill. With over 28,000 species across every continent except Antarctica, orchids are the second largest family of flowering plant, and they have conquered almost any environmental niche that you can think of. 1,700 orchid species call Australia home, and of these, 95% can be found nowhere else on Earth. In Canberra alone, we've got more orchid species than the entire United Kingdom. But why do we have so many orchid species in Australia? And what is it that makes this continent so special? That's what I'm trying to figure out. To do that, I've been trying to track down the family tree of Australian orchids, but unfortunately for me, orchids aren't great record keepers, so all I've got to work with is DNA. So by lining up and comparing sections of genetic material that can be found across all of these orchids, I've been trying to work backwards to reconstruct their family history and figure out who's related to who. You'd think that using genetic data would be far more reliable than using birth certificates or marriage records, but I found that after millions and millions of years, these genetic records are full of conflicting stories, and it looks like these orchids have been hiding quite a few skeletons in the closet. Turns out this family tree isn't a single unbroken line all the way back to the great-great-grand orchid, but instead we've got an incestuous family web where a lot of present-day diversity has stemmed from several matings between distant cousins. Now, this pattern is being observed increasingly across the entire tree of life, and my work adds to a growing body of evidence which suggests that life is a mess. The tree of life should really be the web of life. People like to classify things and put them into tidy categories to try and make sense of the world around us. But this pattern challenges this idea that life itself is something that can even be defined by boxes and boundaries. Life is far more interconnected than we ever realized, and knowing that life is more a web than it is a tree is a profound shift in our thinking, which brings us so much closer to understanding how life on this planet actually grows and changes through time. By understanding an organism's evolutionary past, we may be able to predict and preserve its evolutionary future in the face of human-mediated climate change and habitat loss. While orchids are one of the most diverse and successful families on the planet, they're also one of the most vulnerable to these threats, with at least 10% of Australian species alone threatened with extinction. It's my hope that by learning how these orchids came to be, we can make sure that the only dead orchids are the ones on our windowsills.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, we've listened to our 12 speakers. It's time for the judges to do a spot of judging and for us to decide what we think. Okay, you've seen them, you've heard them. What do you think of them? Because you get to vote in the people's choice. What's going to happen now while the judges gracefully retire to add up their scores is that you're going to see the QR code on the screen and you can vote for your favorite. You've got about 10 minutes to do this, so don't panic. And while you're voting, while you're thinking about today's contestants and how good they are, we can listen to the music of Starboard again. So would you please welcome Starboard? Thank you. We've closed the polls. We're just doing a tiny bit more adding up. So bear with us for 2 more minutes, and then we're going to announce some winners. Hope you enjoyed Starboard. They're available for weddings, parties, and anything. Just come and see me afterwards and I'll take 10%. Okay, I have the envelopes. This is very exciting. The judges have judged. It wasn't easy, apparently, which I warned them. 12 amazing, it's almost, it's like splitting hairs. It's very hard to choose a winner when they're all this good, but they have, and so I'm going to get Anne to come out and join me. She can do the Hollywood, the Oscars thing and open the envelopes. Let's start by getting all the contestants back on stage to give them one last huge round of applause. And just to build the anticipation even more, let's get the judges out on stage, because I have a little thank you for them. 5 judges. Where are they? The judges are very shy. A tiny thank you. Thank you for doing such a brilliant job. Was it easy?
No, not at all. Definitely not.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, Anne, step forward. The People's Choice winner first. So this is the popular vote. And there were hundreds of votes.
They're very... We're not going to have any disasters here with this wrong things in wrong. People's Choice, the winner is Sai Ramesh.
Building dramatically, second prize.
And the winner of second prize is Nick Barishev.
And the first prize with $4,000 and representing ANU at the Asia Pacific final is...
Gets more dramatic. Sai Ramesh.
One last round of applause for all our contestants tonight. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our contestants, our judges, the people who helped make this happen, to everyone in the ANU research community. It's such a special place to work. Same time next year. See you back here. Thank you very much.
We didn't get photos.
Oh, sorry.
The handing over
the
the
handing
checks
over
and things.
the giant novelty digital transfer.